just because you're out of the service doesn't mean you lose your community. This is about getting veterans in that need to get out of the house and start building community within your community. Mm-hmm. When I got into this, I created this film, and it's a film I didn't know I had to create.
From the final battles of World War I to leading the invasion of Casablanca during World War II to surviving 3 helicopter crashes in the jungles of Vietnam, the Patton last name is one of the most respected and highly decorated in American military history. Benjamin Patton continues his family's legacy in the veteran community through the Patton Veterans Project, a film workshop hosted by Academy Award-winning film producers catered to helping veterans heal from their invisible wounds. This week on the show, we sit down with Ben, Mike, and Randy to talk about the impact the program has had on everyone involved, upcoming events and workshops, and most importantly, the future well-being of our veteran community. Our mission here on the Veterans Voice podcast is to remind you all that you're not alone. As you hear through the stories of our guests, each and every week, we have all struggled, we have all turned to poor outlets to cope with life, and we have all felt alone at times. But these are the reasons we need to all be there for one another within the veteran community, a community whose voice is needed in America more than ever. This is the Veterans Voice podcast, and this is a reminder that you're not alone. Ben, Mike, Randy, I got you guys all here to discuss the Patton Project. How's everybody doing?
Doing well today.
Who wants to give the brief introduction to why we're here today? Ben?
Sure. So the organization is called the Patton Veterans Project. Okay. And so I am a civilian, but I have been around the military my whole life, and about 6 generations before that in my family, actually on my mother's side. And I do have a grandfather that was somewhat famous in World War I and II, and then my dad was also a retired Major General and saw even more action and more highly decorated than his dad. So dinner table talk was a lot of fun in my family. But anyway, in 2011, I came up with the idea for the Patton Veterans Project, started and got invited to go to Fort Carson, actually for my first workshop, and do basically it's a weekend program where veterans that about 10 or 15 veterans come to maybe a dozen or more veterans come together for a weekend, and they learn about filmmaking, and they also, over the course of a weekend, supported by professional filmmakers, extremely experienced film instructors and filmmakers, make short films collaboratively about things that are often difficult to talk about. And we can talk about the elements of why it works, but that's the essence of it. So by the end of a weekend, they've worked in groups of 3 or 4 people supported by an instructor and produce a short film. And, I'll let these guys lend embellishment to that.
Yeah. Mike and Randy, just go ahead and give a brief introduction of yourself and how you guys are involved in the Patton Project.
Absolutely. So I'm Mike, and I collaborate with Ben through the VA. This is through the process that we're doing right now is with a VA grant sponsored by the Office of Rural Health. I am a peer specialist with the VA, certified peer specialist. And we met up we started talking in June of last year about the possibility of me coming on to this grant. And then I graduated with my bachelor's in human services and got hired on full-time officially in November of this past year, and have gone 100 miles an hour on this project. At first, I was not aware of really what it was about. I mean, I could hear it, but I didn't know exactly what it was going to entail. So I actually I have a theory I say that, the best salesman tries their product. So I went ahead and did the first workshop in December at the University of Wyoming, and we started up on that Friday evening, and I was a little nervous just because I was also there working as a peer specialist, and my boss at the time, Dr. Charles Dreving, is the clinician on staff. And I was a little nervous at first, and then we got into Saturday, started talking about group ideas of what movies we want to create, and ended up hitting a nerve when we started talking about my story. And I ended up needing to talk to my boss for an hour just to kind of get me back on the rails, because definitely went off the rails a little bit. But we ended up making a movie that had a big chunk of my story in it, but also 2 other veteran stories as well. They kind of collaborated together and made the Christmas Eve, the Christmas season. It hasn't been great. I lost 3 brothers on Christmas Eve night on a convoy we shouldn't have been doing in the rain on a mud bridge in Iraq. And, I didn't realize how bad it suppressed it until this workshop. And we created the film on Sunday, and, last past year was the best Christmas Eve I've had in 15 years. So
I'm sorry to hear that story, man. That's very emotional, but I'm glad you were able to express it through videography, it sounds like, and deal with it in a healthy way. So that's kind of what it sounds like you guys are trying to help veterans do.
Absolutely.
Randy?
My name is Randy. I got into this project January of this year. Mike said, hey, you got to come do this project. I retired, not doing a lot, needed to get out of the house. Mike knew that, got me to one of the workshops. I went, a lot of fun, wasn't what I expected, didn't know what to expect. That's the difficult part, being that veteran. You're like, okay, great, what are they going to want to do? Are they doing a one-on-one interview? Want nothing to do with that. But it's far from that.
Right.
So the workshops have been amazing. My career, I was active duty Army for 16 years, and then I became a spouse for 4.5, 5 more years till now she's my ex-wife, but my wife at that time, she retired, and we had 4 kids while in the military. I did my time. I did my combat tour. I didn't know it messed me up.
Right.
I didn't know that. I was a Gulf War. And as Ben, I don't like to introduce myself when we're at the workshops. I like Ben to do that because I don't like talking about myself.
Right.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
And I love it when Ben introduces, hey, this is Randy. So that's helpful. And I like to do the same for Ben because, I like to say, hey, this is Ben Patton and here and this, and, and he's received these. I think that we mesh well together.
Right.
So the 3 of us is a little team. And then with our filmmakers, great entourage that we have going, all of us. But my career, I didn't know it was going to mess me up. And I thought I was experiencing things, but I had what I call my 18-hour experience in combat, and it kind of messed me up.
That's enough.
Yeah.
18 hours.
I wound up getting a Bronze Star from it. And they don't give Bronze Stars to E4s in 1991, and I didn't know why they were, and, just those kind of things. And back in 91, nobody was wearing Bronze Stars because Vietnam was the last people that had any awards in that manner. And people looked at me and, what the heck is that? And I didn't know. I didn't know it was that kind of a special award, but that's not who I was. But then I just started experiencing the things, the flashbacks, and I was just like, wow, what is going on? So I didn't know if it was just me. So then when I went for mental health, they had none. It was just like, oh, we don't know what to tell you. Literally, I put in twice for PTSD and got denied, saying, oh, you weren't in combat. Well, I was in combat. I did have a Bronze Star. I did have this. It is in my records, but nobody thought that back then.
Right.
Back in 2005 is when I put in. It took till 2010 for it to really get recognized for all the soldiers that were then in that combat time to start showing these effects, for them to take some, came to their attention. And it wasn't until 2018 till I was able to get recognized for that.
For sure.
But with this project, the collaboration, I know Ben wears 3 bracelets because he wants to be able to give one away at all times. I wear the one, but we give it away at our workshop, and it's listen, collaborate, and empower. And that collaborate part really sticks with me because that is what the workshop is about in a straight nutshell. These people that know nothing about each other come in, and you're trying to figure out, oh, who do I want to group with? What word up there on that wall is the word I want and I recognize? So my first one was suicidal ideations. You know, I didn't know about suicidal ideations. I just like, oh, you have to keep quiet about this stuff. And 3 of us did it, and it was a powerful film. And we didn't know each other at all, and now we're friends. I mean, my gosh, you know, just after, and then people watch it and saying, hey, that was pretty strong. And it is. And you don't hold back. But our filmmakers are amazing at their craft. Ben can talk about how he's brought in these amazing filmmakers. Go ahead, Ben.
No, but let me just add that. So the whole, Randy's right. The whole secret to this is collaboration. I mean, I'm a psychologist and also a filmmaker. And so I do, and I've been around veterans for most of my life. And also we have done this 75 times with 1,500 vets and made nearly 400 films since 2011. And I've done workshops at about 9 major bases, including one that you certainly trained at, Fort Bragg / Fort Liberty.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so I've had a lot of experience around it. And of course, people don't hurt themselves when they're hanging out with their friends making films or at a barbecue or at church. You know, this is not when it happens. So the very fact that they're getting together is the key. And the tricky part is that we've been hired by the Office of Rural Health in this particular case in the Rocky Mountains, where the suicide rate is 2.5 times the national average in Wyoming and Montana. I mean, it's huge. And there's 60,000 vets with PTSD that are not enrolled in the VA. So this is suicide central. So they've hired us specifically to see if we can help reduce that. And the way we do it is getting them into a room. They sort of forget about themselves and they start making a movie. And pretty soon they're like, oh my God, I got to finish this movie. They get to the end of it. They've made friends, not only with veterans, but sometimes with civilians. Many of my instructors are vets. One of them is an Oscar winner. I mean, these guys know how to make films. And so that's the idea. And the last word on the bracelet is empower. And typically, I would say the vast majority come out of these workshops and they're kind of feeling different about themselves. And one mental health chief at the Bronx VA that I've done a number of workshops at said, the key to this workshop, what it does is help a veteran, change their perspective on themselves and the world. And if you can get a veteran, particularly a struggling one, to change their point of view on something, you can do anything. And that's kind of what happens. And just to finish by saying what's different about what we're doing here, and we're not a VA program. I mean, we don't even really talk about the VA when you come into the workshop. Initially, it's kind of come and make a creative film with other vets. But what we did learn in a clinical study with this same Dr. Drebbing, who at the time was stationed in Massachusetts running a VA there, is that we did a clinical study that showed that 8 out of 10 of unenrolled vets that had diagnosable levels of PTSD took an appointment with the VA within a couple of months. And so that's why they hired us, to bring us out here to this area. And what's different than it's ever been in the 12, 13 years I've been doing it is that they're following up. And that person who's following up is sitting right in front of you, Mike Lehman, as a member of the VA. Hey, a month after the workshop, 4 months after the workshop, we have a screening. How are you doing? You didn't have care before. Did you get it? Are you doing anything more than just getting your meds? Have you talked to your ex-wife lately? Whatever it is to keep them on the road moving forward to the point where they continue to take initiative to get to the next step of their lives. That's really the whole thing.
Yeah, I want to talk about this upcoming workshop specifically, but I really want to hear, hopefully from all of you guys, what do you think it is? I think it's just being creative in general, but specifically filmmaking that is helping people cope with some of their emotions. Like, what do you think it is within that skill?
I mean, you guys want to jump in, or do you want me to start?
I think it doesn't have to be reality. It's something you can create that can be, from our workshops, we've done everything from biological to commercials to different comedies. It doesn't have to be about you. It could just be a particular message. And therefore, you don't have to live it if it's not yours,
right,
if you will.
Right.
You can.
It's very safe.
Yeah, it's a safe place, and we make sure that these locations that we do are very secure location, where there's no filming outside of it that gets leaked or anything like that. It's strictly, you're here, you're doing this film workshop, and you can either be a director for the day, you can be behind the camera, you can be the main actor. So you have many opportunities to portray something outside of your normal scope of living.
Right. And it's important to say that if the four of us made a film about grief and we each had our own specific experiences around it, if it was just my film or my story or your story, it wouldn't be relevant to everybody else particularly. But on the other hand, if the four of us made a film together and came up with kind of a composite, somewhat fictionalized story, it would not only be safe. In other words, we don't have to say anything we don't want to say. Like Mike said, we don't have to be on camera, but it may resonate with a great many more people. And what's very interesting is that film is a very unique medium. It's certainly the most powerful and most ubiquitous one we have. I mean, you can push a button and have somebody see your film anywhere in the world. And it also encompasses a lot of other types of narrative therapy, if you will, that's been proven to work, whether it's art or drama or music or all these things. So there's a lot of things happening at once. But I think the main thing is that in the safety of it lies its power.
The Veterans Voice podcast is sponsored in part by Optum and is produced in the Optum Podcast Studio. Optum and Mountain View Medical Group offer 20 clinics throughout the Pikes Peak region. Their primary and specialty care doctors provide quality, patient-centered care backed by Optum's industry-leading health services and technology. They are dedicated to helping our community live healthier while keeping care affordable. Visit optum.com/Colorado to learn more and schedule your appointment today. You guys make these short films in your workshops. You mentioned the word grief or the emotion grief. Let's just use another one, shame, for example. Like make a short film with these four individuals about shame. That collaboration aspect, I understand how powerful it is, because my first instinct to that would be like, oh, I definitely understand shame, but like, I don't want to talk about that in front of everybody. I don't want to do a film about shame in front of these three other guys. But then you realize everyone's thinking that, and everyone else has a story about feeling shameful, and you're like, man, I'm not alone. And then through this collaboration, you understand that you're not the only one.
Well, it's kind of interesting because we had a film once called Alone Together, which is kind of what you're talking about, which is fascinating. Two guys with two pieces of a brick that were walking around looking for the other piece that fit into their piece. And so you're right. And also you don't have to come and make a film about shame if you don't want. And the other thing that's wonderful about our program is that you can have your story. Maybe it doesn't, I'm not saying you, but maybe it doesn't end so well the way it is right now. You're in the midst of your crisis. Well, a lot of people make films that are hopeful and they can change the narrative. So it's something that they look at that inspires them to the next step, even if it's a hopeful ending, even if it's not exactly what happened to them. So there's so many different tools you can use. And we also, as instructors, never try to say that we've been through their experience.
Right.
I mean, I was at 9/11. I have a friend died at 9/11. And so, maybe other people can't relate to that sort of indirect experience. But what we do understand is film collectively. And so we can tell them not what to do, but sort of how to do it. We're sort of the creative banks of the river. And I think they understand that. And once they get to know us, I think it actually causes us to be able to bond, because a lot of these emotions are universal. I can't say I was ever in a Green Beret's shoes and gotten shot at or missed a meal or heard a shot fired in anger, but I can tell you what grief is about, having been married to a woman that committed suicide or something. Which I did. So, So
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Ben, I'm passionate about that subject right there. Emotion is the universal language. I'm convinced. We don't know how to really speak it all in unison yet, but we all understand heartbreak. We all understand love. We all understand missing someone. We all understand pain, but we all have different stories. So, like, my worst pain is different than your worst pain, and it's different than Randy's and Mike's, but we all understand the emotion
And
involved.
it feels the same.
It feels the same.
It may not be the same, but it can feel the same.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what connects us.
Yeah, a simple example, if someone's only ever broken a pinky and another person has bilaterally fractured their femurs, both people only know what a broken bone feels like. The pinky and the femurs, obviously one's more drastic than the other, but they still only know the same pain.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's really cool. You guys got
But the follow-up is the critical thing, because we used to do these workshops like at Fort Carson, and we were working exclusively at WTUs. The 4th ID commander, who became the 18th Airborne commander, that's why I know Fort Bragg so well. Joe Anderson, he joined my board, and he got us into about 9 bases. And so, so it's just been a very powerful thing to connect with people. But the follow-up is key, because now I don't just go to Fort Carson and never see that guy again. Now we do a workshop, we do a screening 1 month later when they can come, bring their family. They've been looking at it for a month and thinking about it for a month. They introduce it, and then it's very validating. And we have audience. You can talk about that, Mike. We have audience reviews that show that the audiences are completely moved and surprised and empathetic before they were just ambivalent and ignorant. And so the follow-up is key, because it's no longer a moment and then they go back to playing Fortnite for 13 hours a day, and I think Mike has been very involved in that part of it and can speak to that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the audience, with their surveys, that what we get to see is something that they may not be able to show in society very often, is it shows that they get to learn what veterans are going through in the moment. So they get to see these films where a lot of them have an emotion of some sort that it's very powerful to them, but the civilians can come in and be like, oh my goodness, like I knew it was bad, but I didn't really know, because they don't really know. A lot of us don't talk about it. So there's a vast gap there. But what's been huge for us is having the veteran audience come in and watch these screenings and be moved to the point. Even just at the last workshop we had at University of Wyoming, we had a screening at CSU the night before, and we had a veteran come up to the workshop from that screening the next day, because it hit him so powerful that he just had to be a part of it. And not knowing what we go through, it's hard for civilians. And we just, sometimes when we get out and we're out in public, we just assume that they should know what we're going through. And it's really not the case. And these screenings have really helped the society in each different locations we're at kind of get a good sense of, oh, wow, this is really a problem that we need to come and support. And we've had numerous audience members come to other work screenings to show support for the next participants.
What's exciting?
Let me say that
go ahead.
one of the reasons we're here, other than having you come to the workshop, is to recruit, because Mike is sort of our chief recruiter, lead recruiter. And what's sort of, I guess, ironic, you could say, is that the closer we get to the audiences that we're really going for, we'll have any veteran come, and I'll tell you why. But the ones we're really targeting are those ones that are struggling. And the closer we get to them, the more stigma around it is. That's why we don't do it at VAs anymore, or even military bases, because there's so much stigma around it. So getting them in the door is a difficult thing. Once they get in the door, 90+% of them stay. But there is a stigma around those things, and we really kind of work toward trying to reduce that. And I would also say another reason why we're here, which makes it more difficult, is, well, we're coming back to Colorado Springs, and I have 1 or 2 people that are connecting us, other vets that retired outside of Fort Carson. But we, when we're in a new area, we don't have that sort of pack of evangelical vets that come out of here and go, wow, like these 2 guys, they're very passionate about doing this, and nobody's getting paid very well, and they want to get people here because they think it works, just like I do. And so, but as we go to a new place, we always want to come back to it. Like we'll for sure come back to Pikes Peak because we want the veterans to find the other veterans because they know where they are. I don't, and our VA clinicians don't, but you guys do.
Right. Well, yeah, why don't we segue into that? This upcoming workshop here in Colorado Springs, who wants to tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So just like all these workshops, we kind of run on a set schedule. You come in on Friday. Usually I try to get them in here at 5:30 so we can do our intro surveys, basic information, first, last name, how many years did you serve, branch, how are you feeling, what's your state of mentality, how are you feeling currently. We'd like to get that information at the beginning. That way we can, once we get through the workshop, we know they can adjust fire 1 month, 4 months of how they feel. If they really, and we can identify, it helps us identify what veterans do we need to really kind of keep an eye on.
Right.
And then we'll usually do pizza salad for Friday evenings.
What's pizza salad?
So pizza and salad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We don't mix them together.
Well, yeah, you know, you
Could
just
be.
throw
Newest kind of pizza. It's salad pizza. It's Mike. I mean,
it's like
Randy
Italian
loves it.
nachos, really.
Okay, yeah.
No, it's so we order pizza from a local pizza place around here, something that's familiar, and we'll get salad or wings depending on the night, and we grab our pizza, and then at 6 o'clock we start sharp with a little intro into film. We do our introductions, and we go into a basic intro into film, and learn how to use the basic camera. And we end up getting these veterans into groups of 3. We do it randomly, so they can't pick and choose friends. So what we do is we do a silent film on a particular word. It's a short film. It's about
Don't give
30,
it all
40
away,
seconds.
though, Mike. Don't give it all away.
Okay. We do a short film about a particular word, and then at the end of filming it, the instructors go ahead and edit it overnight. We come back in Saturday, and we watch those films, try and guess what the word they're trying to portray in each film, and then we get more into instructional film, and like breaking down scenes and plots and camera angles and how to work cameras, and we do that for a few hours in the morning on that Saturday. We also provide small breakfasts and lunches for each day of the workshop, Saturday and
We
Sunday.
always have a clinician in the room.
Yep, we always have a clinician because we know our stories can get real.
Right.
And like I said earlier, I've had to use that clinician
Yeah.
who was my boss at the time. And we get a little more into film instruction. Then around 11 o'clock, we get into a big group and kind of pick out different words that might have meaning to us, whether it's suicide, transitioning, sexual trauma. It can vary.
Mm-hmm.
Usually we fill up about 2 or 3 whiteboards with different words that these veterans are feeling are impactful. And we break down into, we let them pick their favorite word. And we try to break down into 3 or 4 films, depending on the size of the group. And we figure
We
out.
sort of connect the ideas,
right.
Because we can't make 20 films, but we assimilate these different ideas and kind of let them coagulate, and then they self-select into groups. But go ahead, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so then we have lunch, and they kind of mull over the ideas that we've come up together, and then after lunch, they kind of get into these groups and try to figure out what idea sounds right for them. There's no force into you have to act, you have to be on camera. No. If you don't want to be on camera, you don't have to be. You can be behind the camera, or you can use it as a chance to be a director. We've also had an individual who we didn't even use their name. We just gave them kind of a false name just so they still get the opportunity to perform in this workshop, but don't have to give themselves away as being a part of it.
Right.
And then we get into that afternoon, Saturday afternoon, they start figuring out the movie they're going to make, where they're going to film on campus, or in case of November, we're at the National Museum of Military Vehicles, so they get to figure out where in that museum they want to film, and then what's the script going to be, how many actors you might need, what kind of props you might need, and then at the end of Saturday we get into our groups and one big group, and we go over basic ideas of what we need, what's the story about, do you need any extra actors, do you need any props, stuff like that. And then
we're basically we shift to saying, hey, we're just a bunch of people making movies together, kind of thing.
Cool.
It becomes much more collegial rather than didactic and teaching.
Right. And then we come in Sunday morning, and we do a little safety brief, and we hit the ground running, get their filming done. We usually like to be done by 1:30 in the afternoon. The reason we want that is we want to make sure we have the appropriate time to edit these films. So they get to, after they've finally done filming, grab their quick lunch, usually grab a box lunch, and we get right into editing, and the instructors show them how to edit the whole editing process. They have their input into it, and at the end we have a mostly finished film that we watch at the end of it, and then we kind of break down, how did the workshop go for you? Is there any pros or cons? How are you feeling? And then we get into kind of the next steps, and over the next week, you're going to get the film back. It's going to go on our YouTube channel. We make sure they sign a release.
Yeah, let me interject to
yeah.
say that I've been doing this since 2011, and at the very beginning, I insisted on not, we'd fly out from New York or wherever the instructors come from all over, California, Seattle. We've worked at JBLM, and so we don't have a release when we start. It's only after you would screen your film 5, 6 o'clock on Sunday that we would say, look, if you're feeling comfortable with this, check with the rest of your group. And if you guys are willing to sign a release, we'd love to put it up on YouTube. And of the, let's say, 1,400 vets I've worked with, every single one has signed it. These are about 100 of these were veterans we worked with in Israel, here, all over the country. And everyone, by the time they get finished, that sort of, whether it's shame or just reluctance or stigma, they just change, and they just feel like, oh, dude, of course I'm going to sign it. I want the general officer at Fort Stewart to see this damn thing. That cool. Kind of, I've had that one.
Yeah.
I had to put a chair, like an easy chair, in the front row of at Fort Stewart screening, because this guy wanted to talk about how, his senior NCOs didn't take care of him, and in his case, it was a negative outcome. He's laying, in the middle of the floor with a bunch of pills laying out next to him, and their insignias of all the NCOs and officers that didn't help him. And then he wanted to have the Major General come. I forget his name. So 10 years ago, and the guy came, sat in the front row, and they hugged afterwards, and he got him some help.
Wow.
It was really cathartic. Sometimes it's just about getting this off your chest, and and what we do is help them make it effective. That's why we teach them, here's the 3-act structure. Here's why Tom Cruise always has that moment about 2/3 through the film where he goes, what should I do? Goose, what should I do? And and there are reasons why films are built in certain ways, and we're able to share with them our expertise about how to do something to make it effective, but only in the service of the story they want to tell.
Right. Ben, I'm noticing you're really passionate about this. How did you become so passionate about this specifically, like helping veterans through film?
That's a hard answer. I'll try to keep it short. I think there was a bit. I almost went to the Naval Academy, and I just woke up. It was 1983. It wasn't Cold War, but it wasn't a lot going on. It wasn't Desert Storm even, and I just thought, I wanted to try something different, and we'd sort of maxed the course in the military, and it's hard to compete with these legends in my family, and even for my father, who was more decorated and saw more combat time than his father, But so I had a little bit of the what should I do with my life thing, like my older brother did too. Like, did I make a wrong decision? And then at about 30, I got into music and filmmaking, and then just fast forwarding to about 2005, I had always wanted to teach kids. And I was working on a psychology degree, really focused on developmental psychology. And I was interested, and I had been doing some filmmaking. I switched careers and got into production and film and different things, and public television and other places. And I started running these film camps in Denver, and we had a family farm in Massachusetts. And the teenagers making these 2-week film programs, which are just recreational fun programs, were making films about identity most of the time, like a 13, 14, 15-year-old girl, first kiss, getting picked on, my first pimple, getting beat up in the playground. And I started to wonder, I was actually talking to my dad's chopper pilot, who introduced us to General Anderson, the 4th ID commander and the hospital commander, who also joined my board at Fort Carson, about this. And he said, well, it'd be great if you could maybe come to the SVAC or the WTUs and try this out. So I think I'd always had this feeling, after I got over being a selfish 20-year-old, I had this feeling like that my dad and my grandfather always said, leave the world better than you found it. And I realized by about my 30s, when I started getting into this, that my dad didn't really, lose sleep over my not going in the military. He just wanted me to find my passion. He used to have a quote that I say at every workshop from Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. Whatsoever your hand findeth itself to do, do it with all thy might. And I get choked up when I say it, but I figured that out. And once I pivoted And then I got involved with these clinicians, and I knew that it worked. And once we proved it, we got the governor of Wyoming to get behind it, and we got clinicians everywhere. And I just feel like when we get over the top and people start to know about this, they're going to see how incredibly powerful this is, not just for veterans, but for something I'm writing a book about right now. I did write a book about my father, actually, called Growing Up Patton, about 10 years ago. But now I'm working on one that I think is going to be called Lost and Found. And it's about, I'd say the goal is to help reduce this military civilian divide. It takes us through each conflict in American history and explores the arcs of technology and communication, healthcare, and family involvement, and all these things. And it's just interesting how we could go from a time in the American Revolution when families are literally they're called camp followers, literally following their soldiers around, sewing buttons on and bringing them soup. And now you can push a button, and I can talk to a friend of mine that was in, the first Battle of Fallujah when Tommy Franks came in, another Bronze Star recipient, but yet there's this divide. I can communicate with them in a second, but there's still this divide of not so much spitting on vets like Vietnam, but ambivalence and ignorance. And I think these guys will say that, Randy, one of you can speak to this, that you're sort of pleasantly surprised when you see these civilians, even when they see me or my instructors, they just sort of get it, and even the audience just kind of gets it because it's this medium that we all can understand. I mean, film is an empathy machine, basically.
For sure.
So that's kind of why I got passionate about it, and I get choked up at every one of these events. And it just feels like that's what's supposed to happen until we hit this thing out of the park and do it everywhere in the country and abroad.
I kind of want to add it
Please.
to what he was saying, and to what Mike was saying. We have these screenings. So I'm going to give you a couple examples here that people will stand up, these civilians that could be a family member, could be just somebody that heard about it, come to these screenings and will stand up in front of everybody and say, what did that mean? What were you guys doing? We have that Q&A. Ben's son came to one and stood up and asked a question. The film was Blue Falcon. You know what Blue Falcon was.
For sure.
Here, I sat the whole weekend, watched this film being made of Blue Falcon. It was basically
funny,
a commercial.
actually.
It was a
understand.
commercial for Blue Falcon Insurance, and I kind of
It's
got
up on our
the
YouTube
gist
channel.
of it.
Check it out.
And I'm just like, oh, okay, whatever. and I'll keep it I'll keep this PG. But Ben's son said, what does it stand for? And nobody said anything. And then one of the vets off in the back went, and gave the BF, word. I'm like, what? Oh, that's what it stands for.
Yeah.
My era, we just said it. We said BF. We didn't use an acronym.
Buddy.
I never heard
There
of
you go. I didn't know if I can say it.
Yeah.
So, I didn't want to.
I had never heard of that. I had never.
And
heard
I
of that.
hadn't. I'd used those words
Right.
all the time, but I didn't know it had been given that. But then there's other people that ask. We had Michael up at UW asked this question, and I was so glad. Not our Michael, but another Michael asked this question. I was so glad I was recording it. I was like, that was one of the most intelligent questions I've ever heard somebody ask. Now, I don't remember what it was to this day, but at that moment, it was so profound. I was just like, wow. He read into that thing and asked such a question that it was amazing that you walked out of there and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Our screenings are
I used to worry.
powerful.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah,
I used to worry at the screenings, though, that there would be like somebody, particularly when we started doing civilian screenings as part of the protocol, like community screenings, that somebody come in, you effing vets, you baby killers, like they didn't get, and I don't think there's been a particularly negative comment. There may be someday, although, we've had people that, have texted and say, my ex-husband made this film and I don't like him or something like that, but it's an authentic.
Yeah, that was
just a vehicle. But I will say, I want to give one more brief example. And I don't know whether I'm trying to sell you on this, Taylor, or all the people that are listening, maybe both. But so we always have a clinician on hand. But I've worked with this Dr. Drebbing, who recently retired as mental health chief in Cheyenne, VA, and was at a VA outside of Boston when I met him. But he came to the first few workshops we were doing when he was just getting, just sticking his toe in the water, trying to figure out if there was something there. And he would sit in the back and I just let him know there's a clinician here, and even say he was from the VA, this guy, just in case you have to talk to somebody. And eventually they figured out who he was. But by the end of the first workshop he was at, and it's continued on, he was a grip, he was an extra. He was no longer Dr. Driving. He's like, hey, Chuck, get over here, man. We need an extra. He was in a great film we shot at an American Legion in Laramie 2 weeks ago. And he pops up as like a bartender. He's got a towel on his shoulder. But if you think about that, if you think about these stigmatized veterans that do not want to talk to me or even you maybe, they come in and by the end, they've totally forgotten. They're just like, it's just Chuck, man. Chuck is a great guy and he should be in our film. And you got to love that.
The Veterans Voice podcast is supported by Medicare Mentors. When it's time to consider your Medicare options, it's time to talk with Medicare Mentors. Medicare Mentors, powered by Spark, is veteran-owned and a long-standing partner with Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center. More than that, they go above and beyond to make sure when you need them, they're there lending a helping hand. Medicare Mentors, always above and beyond. Visit MedicareMentorsLLC.com for more information.
I just had a doctor on last week, and we discussed imposter syndrome within high-performing individuals, specifically military, special operations, doctors, things like that. And I'm kind of tying two together right now because the individual you just described sounded like a very high-performing individual, but he took pride in being a bartender in this film. It's like we can throw our imposter syndrome in the trash and just play this role for a few hours or a few weeks for this film, and it's kind of a release. It's a form of therapy. I'm going to play this bartender and just that's my only worry in the world is to be this bartender for a few weeks. So I see the therapeutic benefit of this for sure.
Exactly right. And for those 20 hours, you don't really have to worry about much else. These guys run these workshops very well. So we've gotten to the point where it's so tight that the filmmakers don't have to think about anything else but the filmmaking, and that includes the instructors and the participants. And so for that moment, they're in this sort of place where this is their purpose. And in a certain sense, again, I haven't been a soldier, but I've been involved in companies and Boy Scout troops and whatever, where you have responsibilities and hierarchy. And, for those few days, they're like, dude, I have a purpose here. You know what I mean? And then that sort of spills over, hopefully, into how they're feeling afterwards. That's why it's very important that you get them to come to the screening, that they fill out the surveys, and that they get connected if they need connection. We sprinkle the audience at these screenings with mental health people, civilians and military, and we have resource sheets in the back, not only for the vets, but also for civilians. How do I volunteer? And it works. It just works. We're gregarious people. Humans are sort of designed to be around other humans. My God, they can't even create other humans without being around at least one, right? So, I would say we're intrinsically, gregarious in a way, at least in our core.
Yeah, we're supposed to be together, and I feel like these days we're just becoming further apart. So you guys are making a difference for sure, I can tell.
Yeah, the collaboration, we had these 3 vets in this last one at UW that came together, and I believe these 3 guys now are friends for life.
Cool.
The way they put everything together and the way they did their filming and just everything about it, it looked like they belonged together, that they had served together. How can you do that in a weekend? I don't give people a chance.
Yeah.
It takes a year sometimes before you give people that kind of a chance. And all of a sudden here they're walking out of a weekend. Now, we talk about collaborate, but we also have a couple individuals that will bring that script with them. And we had one of them in April.
And that's okay.
And it is. And we worked with him. And luckily, we were able to give him kind of his own little film. He had written a script. It was 24 pages.
Whoa.
They had to cut it
But-
down.
But it's not ideal that way. But I
Right.
always say, if you have to do it, you're still collaborating with us, you know. But let me say one thing really quick, Taylor, and
Yep.
I may be just speaking to you here,
Sure.
but some of the most stigmatized, I'm not saying it's you because you seem like you're doing pretty well, but some of the most stigmatized veterans are the ones that have, you know, our special forces, Navy SEALs, Delta, you know, their ICBM. We had our first drone operator in Silo, you know, a ICBM operator or somebody from that crew. Those are really hard to get, and I've always wanted to find out what a drone operator had to say. But we did have in our first UW workshop, we had our first SEAL, and he was SEAL Team Commander 1 in 1972. This dude
Wow.
seen some stuff, and he sort of was a pioneer. And I think we've had one Delta. We're having one of our instructors, his father's was at USASOC. He's Special Forces at Fort Bragg. He's pretty much a lock to come to our workshop in November. So, you know, I think this is, and one other interesting dimension is that at one of the best films we've had, and we're going to show it. Oh, we didn't tell you about our November 11th Vet Fest at Fort Collins at CSU. We're going to have, they've given us their 400-seat theater on November 11th to have. We're going to have, you know, about 6 or 7 films. We're going to give out a few Georgies,
Okay.
which you'll understand when you see them. Named after my dad, not my grandfather, and it's going to be quite a thing. But one of the films that might get one of the Georgies, we don't know. It's called How to Talk First Sergeant, or How to Speak First Sergeant, and the lead actor in it was the VSO, or was the director of the Adult Services Veterans Center at CSU, and this is almost more difficult than getting Special Forces guys,
Right.
because I've realized that a lot of these guys want to help veterans, but they just want to be close to the therapy. They want to be helping it. And if in proximity, they feel like that's enough, but they really are reluctant to open up. And this guy went there, and it led many other people to sign up for this workshop. So those are sort of groundbreaking things that, to me, go beyond the data and just prove to me this is going to work.
Absolutely.
That one had 3 amazing actors in it, though. I mean, one of
Yeah, you
them,
were
the
one of
guy,
them.
the boss at the end was amazing. You know,
That was Randy.
that was me. Yeah.
I know we're audio only, but our listeners, the amount of passion I'm seeing in everyone's body language right now, like everyone is very passionate about this project. So I really appreciate you guys discussing it in this much detail with me. But this workshop coming up, I mean, you got me convinced, and it's only been 48 minutes, but we got a lot of people listening to the show. So if people want to get involved or sign up, how do they go about doing that?
Tell him, Michael, I'm handing it over to you. Give him your name and number and email.
Absolutely. So what you're going to do is you can give me a call at 970-657-5500. It is a cell phone, so you can text if that's a more preferred way of communications. And then you also will email me at workshops@pattonveteransproject.org. What that does is I answer those emails as well. I need just very brief. I need a contact number, your email. So whichever way you send me the vice versa options, and then just a brief little history of who are you, where did you serve, what branch, what years, and what do you want to get out of this. I've had a bunch that they've called and like, I just don't know what this is, and then I give them the same kind of description of that we've gone through here, and I have the phone on. Well, the VA only allows me to work certain hours. I do from time to time. I still respond. So please don't hesitate to
Yeah,
email,
I call him
text.
at 2 a.m. every couple of weeks to make sure he's on the case.
But what's important is don't feel like you have to call us.
Right.
We want you to be ready. This isn't a mandatory once you're registered. Like we're gonna lock you down. As the VA side of it, I don't take notes. I don't chart. I don't look you up. That's not what this is about. This is about getting veterans in that need to get out of the house and start building community within your community. When I got into this, I created this film, and it's a film I didn't know I had to create. And what we really need to do is we need to get these veterans in because they don't know if this story might help start that therapeutic state where they can start getting out of the house. They can start being involved in their community. Just because you're out of the service doesn't mean you lose your community.
Right.
Right.
I think
I think of us more as we're not here to, we can't personally, you're not qualified to like reduce your PTSD symptoms. I don't even usually say the D, but the PTSD symptoms. But what we can serve is a gateway, And this may sound shameless, but to the extent anyone's interested in another General Patton, I'd be happy to give a copy of the book I wrote about him to you or anyone that shows up and says, "Hey, dude, I listened to Veterans Voice podcast," and we'll give them a little takeaway, a little swag, if you will.
Absolutely, yeah, we appreciate it. So it's here in Colorado, right?
It is. It's at Pikes Peak State College.
Okay, yeah, that's right here. And what's the dates on that?
The dates on that are October 4th through October 6th.
Oh, it's coming up.
Yep. And then our screening for that will be on November 12th from 6 to 8:30.
So the screening's after. Oh,
it's a month after.
It's a follow-up.
Yep.
Okay, I see. Cool.
Yep, it helps with
That's the day after our Vet Fest.
Yep.
It's going to be a big week because we're doing a workshop in Du Bois. And then the next day on Veterans Day, we drive 7 hours to the CSU Theater, and we're going to show a bunch of films. We're going to have some special guests there. We're going to have some Georgies. And then I've got one of my Georgetown classmates from college is a Grammy-winning producer and musician, produces Dave Matthews and John Mayer, and he's bringing one of his newer artists with him, and they're going to perform for about a half hour at the end of it. So it's going to be pretty kicking, and there's no charge.
So it's free for anyone who attends
Absolutely.
It's free.
the project, and that's just because it's filtering through the VA? Or
No, it's free because we've never charged veterans.
Okay, wow.
75 workshops. I mean, we were funded by private individuals. Now the VA, nobody's making any money here, but I just can't imagine charging veterans for this. So, and the reason, we're not charging for the Vet Fest either, because I want to get these folks in the door. And once they get in the door, it's my job, it's Randy's and Mike's job to keep them in the door.
Okay.
And of course, we try to get their address so we can go hunt them down at their house if they don't show up, on time.
Right.
Kidding.
But
Are you?
I'm kidding, everybody.
it's really about getting these veterans help in a
Yeah.
way they didn't know was going to be a helpful process.
Right.
And yes, the grants do fund us, but we don't. It would really feel really out of place
Yeah,
at a
for
source
sure.
to charge veterans to get help.
Absolutely. Is there a peak for the workshop, like max number of people, and how many do you have signed up?
In this particular workshop, I'd say, 15, 16. But let me tell you, we've gotten the governor of Wyoming behind us. We're working on people in Congress from Colorado. And I want to go to those people and say, look, we had 20 people on the waiting list.
Yeah.
And so give us some more support, because we'll come back quicker. If some people can't get in, you don't want to have too many people in a film, because in a small film made in 2 days, you don't have enough to do if you have 8 people on the film during editing.
Right.
But you have 3 or 4 in a film, sometimes 5, it's okay. But I mean, that's the thing. So I don't want you to be like, well, we just need one vet. I would like to get as many people to sign up as possible. And if they do, we'll come back that much quicker.
For sure. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on the Veterans Voice podcast, Ben, Mike, Randy, with the Patton Veterans Project. Like I said, we really appreciate it. You guys are doing a phenomenal thing with this project. And like I said earlier, I can feel the emotion. I can feel the passion in all your voice and body language. So you guys are all on the right path. It wasn't always a clean path. Like you said, your 20s are kind of for exploring and seeing a couple different paths, but it sounds like you're on the right track now, Ben. So thanks again, guys.
Thank you so much.
And to all of our listeners, get a hold of Mike. You put out your contact information earlier in the episode, but just your email one more time at the end here.
Yeah, it's workshops@pattonveteransproject.org.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.
USAA is proudly celebrating 100 years of serving the military community. It was a group of soldiers who launched USAA in 1922 by joining together to insure each other's vehicles when no one else would. Since then, USAA has grown to more than 13 million members strong. And through it all, one thing has remained. USAA is still serving the military community and their families. Find out more at usaa.com/100.